nous avons maintenant Sénatrice Moody. Sénatrice Moody, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for coming to join us and to share your information with us. I wanted to follow up on that line of capacity because I'm just trying to understand. You talk about this role being a gap filler, if you will, a responsive role, a role in which this organization would respond to need and would build capacity from, and numbers like 4,000 liters per month of biometric products, 24 million doses, and so on have been thrown out there. From zero to that, how quickly is it going to be possible for you to do this, and what's it going to take for you to actually ramp up? And in realistic terms, what are we looking at in terms of you becoming actually a producer in response to a need?
If you mean in the actual, thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. If you mean in the actual situation right now that we're at, which is we are now scheduled as planned to finish the construction of the facility in July, including the commissioning and the qualification, the validation, and then to work towards a drug establishment license later in the summer, and then do engineering runs by the end of December, and then subsequently in the following year be able to produce. You're right that we won't be able to produce up to that amount of an estimated 2 million a month right away when we start. There is a lot of time that has to be done before full production in terms of testing, in terms of making sure that we have consistency in the batches and stability. So in terms of ramping up to, an estimated 2 million per month, I think it realistically is that it would be covering next year and into the following year that we'd probably be able to ramp up in that capacity.
So my understanding is that the role of this organization and this capability is not in the acute phase of the pandemic or the outbreak or the acute phase of need. It will be in the follow-up phases, the intermediate phases, in a year to 2 years' time. Would that be true? Yes. Okay. And
sorry, I'll just clarify. My apologies. Yes, I mean, I think the real, what we have to remember is when we were, this was announced in terms of building this facility, which is, almost, it was last summer, we were in a pandemic. And the reality is that while, there is a vaccine rollout right now for Canadians, I think it is still very important that we get ready for the pandemic such that we have to plan in terms of into next year, whether there'll be a requirement for the facility to support boosters. We don't know necessarily the life cycle of the efficacy of the current vaccines. And so we want to certainly be in the ready mode to respond to any of those needs into next year.
I have a second question, Madam Chair, and it's a quick one, I hope. I'd like to understand, so part of the process is, important part of the process is the research and the partnering that you will need to do with the research centers, with the research minds within our country. Over the years, that has been significantly contracted. Money into research has depleted, and that's a huge concern, especially in a situation where we're now looking to generate local expertise that moves into local production. How do you see this unfolding, and what steps are being taken to boost research, important biomedical research and vaccine and other important drugs?
Would you like me to answer, Christine? Thanks, Madam Chair. I can speak to certainly, I'll speak to NRC's role in this area, and I'll defer, if it's okay, to my colleague Daryl Patterson after to talk about in terms of the funding that's been provided for research outside of NRC in support of investments that have happened, during the pandemic and before that, and as well with the biomanufacturing strategy. In terms of NRC, we do support a lot of research in the space. We do have the Human Health Therapeutics Research Center that does R&D with academia and the private sector, focusing on, developing and supporting enabling platforms for biologics development and biomanufacturing. And so that is something that they have done significantly. As such, in this space, they have supported many potential vaccine candidates such as VBI and Vito in Saskatchewan. And so they are supporting that. And obviously that is complemented with other funds that some of these vaccine candidates and those receive. So that's the sort of work that NRC has done in this. And, we do have some stats in terms of the number of organizations that it's helped in terms of the clinical stage. But I'll defer to my colleague, Doa Patterson, in terms of the bigger picture of investments in this area.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Christine. And Senator, your question's very relevant and an important piece of the overall biomanufacturing strategy that we're moving forward with. There's certainly a recognition and an understanding that in order to rebuild the life sciences sector and the the biomanufacturing industry, it's not just about building, the end capabilities to manufacture vaccines. The entire value chain needs to be nurtured and developed, not only on their own, but in concert with the investments you're making in the biomanufacturing capacity realm. And so in budget 2021, there's significant amounts of money earmarked for research and for infrastructure. So there's $500 million for the Canadian Foundation for Innovation to support bioscience capital and infrastructure needs of post-secondary institutions and research hospitals. There's $250 million for federal research granting councils to create a new tri-council biomedical research fund. $45 million to the stem cell network to support stem cell and regenerative medicine, as well as a couple other funding mechanisms. And so the idea is that when the strategy rolls out, it's going to have a global view that looks to support strategic areas of research that capitalizes on Canadian expertise in a way that feeds into the sector and the value across the supply chain. So it's a very relevant question and one that the government's focusing on in terms of an overall strategy.
Thank you, and thank you, Senator